Hi, everybody. I want to welcome everybody into the session today. It's very appropriate to our current time. We will be talking about how we've had to rapidly adjust to the changes with the pandemic and how we had to change resident conference and how we obviously had no way of preparing ahead of time for these changes. That's my dog in the background. She clearly wants to be part of the activity. In this episode of Cord Connects, we would like to discuss the successes and failures of this transition and suggest ways to improve even the most digitally facile program. We have a bi-coastal representation today with Thomas Perera and Matt Silver. Thomas Perera is at Northwell. Matt Silver is in San Diego. Both are proud graduates of the Jacoby Montefiore residency. Tom graduated in 1996 and Matt graduated 8 years later in 2004. Tom Perera's introduction is millionaire, philanthropist, and entrepreneur were taken. So Tom Perera has spent his time as a clinician educator and resident advocate, currently associate professor, vice chair of education and teaching, and program director at the Zucker School of Medicine at North Shore and LIJ. He has spent 20 years trying to teach residents to problem solve, extrapolate, and excel. He owes much of his career to the brilliant work of the Cord community and applauds the work they do. His Twitter is @FarOverEdge. Matt Silver. His introduction is, as luck would have it, millionaire, philanthropist, entrepreneur, and PD at Zucker School of Medicine was taken. So Matt Silver moved to San Diego, the area of Sun, to become an entrepreneur, educator, and innovator. He became the founding program director for the Kaiser Permanente Emergency Medicine Residency Program and the founding faculty for the Bernard J. Tyson Kaiser Permanente School of Medicine, which is planned to open its doors this summer. Pre-COVID. He loves to talk about anything that can't be found in traditional EM textbooks, to include technology and education, communication, patient experience, medical malpractice, well-being and resilience. I'm sorry, they're going to start singing soon. Process improvement, cognitive bias, diagnostic reasoning. He is forever grateful to Cord and its amazing community of mentors, educators, and friends he has worked with over the years. I will turn my mic off. Anybody who wants to come play with dogs is more welcome to come. In New York, feel free to come anytime. Thank you very, very much, Tom and Matt, for agreeing to do this. And I am really looking forward to hearing this. And we'll turn my mic off.
I love it. That was just a perfect segue. We're going to talk about Zoom failures and background noise. And I love it. That was just perfect. So I'm going to continue to drink my quarantini here.
So kombucha is for people who have their stomach removed or stapled or something like that.
It's terrible. This is just a prop, actually. So, welcome everybody. We're going to talk. We're going to jump into our talk here and talk about surviving the post-apocalyptic resident conference and how to entertain, educate, and endure, and to ensure that we maintain that sense of community in the age of COVID-19. Learning objectives. We're gonna go through some of the different platforms and resources that exist to support video conferencing. We're going to describe some pearls and pitfalls and best practices. Incorporate some innovative learning methodologies, promote resident and faculty engagement. And then we're going to identify there's probably going to be some features of this, post-apocalyptic conference that are going to endure long after COVID is gone. That will probably enhance our in-person didactics. So,
and I will say, I'd like to just add that during this session, your experience, all of you have so much to add. So a few times we're going to throw the audience, we're going to beg you to participate. But if you have stuff to say, please teach us all, because we have all sort of jumped into this feet first.
So, meet Matt, meet Tom, as Marianne so graciously introduced us. I'm Matt Silver. I left New York about 10 years ago because I just couldn't deal with the attitudes, just the rude, obnoxious people, traffic, it's cold, it's raining. I came to the left coast. Everybody is nice, the patients are kind, the food is tastier, the sun is warmer. Really, just everything is awesome.
It really is the old joke that they tilted the United States and everything loose rolled over to that coast. I think that's pretty much says it all. Those of us in New York will happily stare through our windows at parking lots and curse at people in our cars and be happy as can be.
Yeah, I guess it's just an East Coast, West Coast thing. So I don't know about your experience, Tom, but that first week where isolation began and we had to move online, no problem. I dusted off some oldies but goodies. We did the 5 hours of conference, but we broke it up into really just 3 hour-and-a-half, 2-hour-long PowerPoints. It was great. Who doesn't love a good mot PowerPoint? The residents were engaged. The faculty loved it. Couldn't have been better.
So love that you found a PowerPoint of mine from 1897, and back written on Windows 95. What is really interesting about what has happened is that when we all panicked, it's like we forgot everything we knew about making good conferences. We had known that straight up PowerPoint presentations never were very effective in keeping people interested and involved. The average time it takes an emergency physician to lose interest is about how long it takes them to sit down. So it has never been a great thing, and yet we immediately went back to it. So one, I am not sure you are telling the truth, and two, what a terrible idea.
Maybe it's just an East Coast, West Coast thing, Tom. I don't know. Then maybe you're onto something. Maybe we should try something new. Our second week, we realized that there was just a ton of angst. The residents were freaking out, the faculty were freaking out, and we decided to leave the PowerPoint behind, and we just did straight up 5 hours COVID. We did Q&A, therapy sessions. We did some COVID yoga. We had some long pauses, moments of silence for meditation and reflection. It was really, really therapeutic for everybody.
I would rather eat my own foot than sit through a COVID yoga session. Good God. So the one thing I will say is I'll bet they paid attention, because that was about the time we were all wetting ourselves. And once we changed our shorts, we were very attentive to anybody who would give us information. But I think we all, probably everybody on this call, went through a period where they got completely overwhelmed with COVID. And when we tried to do a conference that was like, hey, what do we need to know? It freaked out half of our residents. And I found that about a week or two into it, I would have to go home and turn off every electronic device I had so that the word COVID wasn't spoken for 15 or 20 minutes in order to even survive the day.
I don't know. Again, maybe an East Coast, West Coast thing, Tom. Our residents really, really loved it. We're planning on continuing doing the 5-hour COVID yoga. The next week we did lighten up. I mean, we ran out of news to talk about with the COVID, and we just did really interactive PowerPoint. We had audience participation. Folks were very respectful, that nobody was talking over anybody. There was no real awkward pauses where you would ask a question and nobody would, there was just dead silence on the other end. It was really very, very stimulating. 5 hours of just interactivity and Q&A. It was fantastic.
Again, I refer to, you must be high. It is amazing. I have a general belief, and it comes from years of being in medicine, that if there is a conference going on and I can shut off my video and my name appears and says I was there, then I am going to walk away. I bet some of your residents, sat outside and got a tan, and conference just ran in the background. There is no way. Plus, New Yorkers are never polite, so that's not going to work in my shop at all.
I don't know. Again, different. Maybe the residents out here are more engaged. East Coast, West Coast thing. I don't know. And then we moved. This was right around the time that Academic Life came out with all of their content, and there were a number of cord posts about there were literally just thousands of different resources. And this next week, I think we're now 4 weeks in, we literally had 18 hours of conference, 12 hours of online interactive, and then 6 hours of individualized interactive instruction. It was just tremendous. We actually canceled all EM rotations for 24 hours so that we could dive into just all of these resources. And then, who doesn't love Blue Jeans? It's one of my favorite platforms, but we cycled through each of these on the hour. And we just tried a little bit of everything. It was like being a bat mitzvah. It was just a smorgasbord. You could take a little of this, a little of that. It was fantastic.
Sorry, Matt, you muted me, and I can't unmute when you muted me.
Somebody muted you.
Which I can understand. So in terms of that, I am amazed at how much awesome content there is out there. Not that much of it is brand new. Like, most of this stuff was available. We were using it for our 20% of conference. But I think that we also all went through a phase where we realized that we were trying to drink from a fire hose. I love steak. I do. And I find if I have small bits of steak, it is awesome. But if I take these huge, massive amounts of steak and stuff them down my throat, I will die of asphyxiation. And that is what I really felt like all of this stuff was about. And we were putting out lectures that people hadn't even seen. So I have no idea what was going on.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for being here on time. Paul? Hey, Paul, can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hey, guys.
Hey, Tyler.
Sorry I'm late. Having a hard time connecting.
1 second. Paul's having a sound issue.
I can't hear you. Try adjusting your output settings.
Can you hear me?
It's the gear icon.
Tyler, are you on hotel Wi-Fi?
Yeah, why?
I just had to change a few settings.
Great. Maybe we can get started then. Oh, great.
I think your mic is picking up your speakers.
My mic?
Do you have headphones?
You want me to put them on?
No.
So I'll bet every one of you out there went through periods like this. And it is not that different than the number of times we were in conference where people would show up with equipment problems and all of that. But man, the beginning of these things was really tough. Another problem that we ran into was distraction. So people putting backgrounds on because they were bored, having too much motion going on in video. It was definitely one of our problems. I would say that if I had to put our biggest fails up there, it would be going back to hour-long conferences, because I think with a video format, you really need to cut it down to 15 or 20 minute before you change things. And people blatantly using slides to get people's attention, and we found that nobody would pay attention to what was actually being said when all this stuff was on, because honestly that's a really cute kitty cat, and it's always going to distract me.
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the cute features that everybody loved to play with early on, and we realized about 5 minutes into the first talk that the rolling video of you on a roller coaster, literally no one can listen to a word you say. That being said, cats jumping into bathtubs. I mean, who doesn't love that? So let's open it up. I'd like to hear from the community out there. What were some of the fails?
The challenges. What were the challenges that you guys faced as you went into this, and things that you say, please don't even try this?
Yeah, so sorry, I'm calling from Florida. We found we had some sim sessions we had to cancel and reorganize. We had hands-on ultrasound sessions, and those proved difficult because then we would have to sort of, not impossible, but sort of do that more over a longer period of time. And sort of, again, we had to reschedule those lectures, so we had to do on the fly. We had also had our annual program evaluation, which was scheduled right in the midst of this, so we had to do that as a distance exercise, which we were able to do with compartmentalizing the PG1s, 2s, and 3s to different chat rooms, and that's about it.
Well, that's awesome. So right there, it brings up two good points. You have just demonstrated one of my favorite new terms. Do you guys all know the Muffin Defense? So it was, you were on rounds in whatever medicine ward you were on, and the person who was presenting would turn to the audience and go, okay, who could answer? And immediately you, as a medical student, would stuff a muffin into your mouth so that you would not have to answer the question. So the modern version of the Muffin Defense, it was Steve Nazario having to unmute his mic. Oh, I'm having audio issues. I can't get on. Matt, you also had some issues around sim. So what was your issue?
Oh, it was a couple of things. We tried really just bringing a camera into our sim lab, and our faculty filmed some scenarios, and we allowed the residents to act as team leads, but remotely. And part of it was just the distractions of video, the folks that were holding the camera jittering around, dropping their phone. It became nothing more than a distraction. We tried a second sim scenario where it was using something called Decision Sim, where it was like choose your own adventure books that we read when we were younger, where you would have these branch points where somebody would have to decide which path to go down. And it works great as an individualized activity, but when you try to do it with 20 residents on, it was like watching grass grow. It was just kind of painful to get through.
And I actually find this to be really interesting because sim should be the perfect thing to do by video. You have 3 or 4 people in a room with a dummy. They're wearing PPE for their own safety. They do the sim, and then everything else beyond that is essentially the debrief that we've all come to know and love. So all of that should be easy, and even that became much more difficult as we made this transition. What else have you guys had that you've been struggling with?
So I think one of the challenges that I had was that I had what could have been a very smooth concept where I was doing a talk, there was a video that was very appropriate, I was going to pull the video in, and then I was going to go to one of those things where you poll people. I'm trying to remember which one. It wasn't poll everywhere, it wasn't, and just the facility of moving the dials, which the night before didn't seem to take that long, but in the midst of having 70 people watching, then took enormous amounts of time in my head.
And by the way, the Kahoot music that you had on was more than distracting.
Yeah, the Kahoot, that's what it was.
Who doesn't love a good Kahoot?
I was just going to say, I think the thing that came to be is a lot of times we're used to running things on the fly and just making light and getting responses from people. And I think, as people mentioned, when you don't get a response and you're talking to yourself on your camera, it feels a little lonely, and that makes it difficult. And then the second thing is, I think some of these interactions and engagements take a lot more time than you might expect, because people don't have the expectations for how to use Zoom. And depending on the type of device that they're on, whether it be their phone, their iPad, their laptop, everyone has their buttons in a different place, as to say. And so you really have to take the time to set some expectations for what they need to use for what you're trying to do that day. If you are trying to have engagement, then you need them to be on a laptop rather than their phone. And I know we had a really hard time after, like Matt was saying, the first week being 5 hours of staring at, PowerPoints, to trying to actually engage them and be like, okay, now instead of on your phone, I need you to actually type some stuff and be in a chat room and do some nonverbal communication on here.
Yeah, I think these are all perfect segues that we're gonna cover over the next 20 minutes or so. Marianne, was there anything else in the chat room? Otherwise, we'll transition over.
I think Beninder was saying that Gordon once took a screenshot of his video camera and then used it as a Zoom background, but never came back to turn off his computer. So again, Gordon is technically challenged, probably in similar ways to me, although probably much more skilled than I am.
Gordon's smart. Nobody knew he wasn't watching. That's just awesome.
And then, the challenge of engaging. Are they there? Are they not there? Are they paying attention? Are they part of the game?
I agree. It is so difficult to read the room, and we're gonna touch on this. So Tom, what do you say we transition from the failures and we jump into successes and some of the wins that we've had?
So here's the thing. You got to go back and remember why we have conference, right? So the real reason we have conference is that sense of community that you get out of conference. There's so much that goes on that day with verbal and nonverbal communications. There is a reason why I am still in touch with many people from my residency class 20 plus years later, and it's because we got to sit together and during conference and realize that everything we were going through was a normal ED doctor thing to go through. So community is absolutely number one reason to have conference. You're muted.
Oh, now I'm unmuted. We're throwing these little tech fails in just to drive the point.
Yeah,
home.
We're doing that on purpose. Sure.
Oh, totally. No, I mean, this has actually been, I think, one of the bigger struggles for the residents. I mean, we're all socially isolated, in our homes, and then you take the social isolation, around the bonding and the teamwork and the camaraderie. I actually think this is one of the, it's not just the didactic component, it's the community building that I feel like, we've lost out on.
So another thing that we absolutely go to conference for is modeling. I came in and looked at the people who were graduating residents and said, by the end of residency, I need to be as smart as they were. And I looked at the way that they interacted and the studies they were able to pull up and the way that they talked. And that interaction was one of my motivating forces to try to learn what I needed to do.
Yeah, and I think, to the half joke I made about the COVID Q&A and the COVID yoga, I think the discussion, the banter that takes place, the socialization, it relieves anxiety. That's a big piece of it. Residents learn from each other. It's not obviously just the speaker. They learn from each other, and it's the ability to kind of normalize a shared experience, which it's difficult to carry that over on Zoom.
It's also a conference. We also get the news. I don't know about your shop, but every week something changes. Every day something changes at my shop. And we can figure out not only how to get through that, but also the private number of the cardiologist who never calls back. All that stuff gets passed around during conference. And then occasionally at the end, there's actually some teaching that goes on to learn emergency medicine. So I think that stuff is really important.
Yeah. So let's transition a little bit into some pearls that that Tom and I have picked up over the past few weeks. Some things that we could share with the community, and then we obviously would love to hear from the community and from the callers. So the first thing that we realized was you can't just take your weekly didactics and move it online and expect that everything is just going to work the way that it did the week before. And some of the things have already been mentioned. And it's that first week, literally, we spent 20 minutes trying to get people to find the link, find the password, log on, download the software. We would call on folks and they weren't there. Their phone, they were doing the muffin trick or they walked away. So we really had to set some norms, right? That folks were going to come prepared. They were going to show up on time, that they were going to be expected to interact. They were going to get called on. And then, there's always, dogs barking in the background.
Thank you, Marianne.
Babies. Thanks, Marianne. That you got to mute unless you're speaking. And then, the half joke I made about everything went great and, everything just marched along. Nobody talked, spoke over anybody else. We know that doesn't happen. And when you have 50 people on a call, trying to allow the audience to participate and just ask questions as they would it's a lot easier to read the room and kind of pick up on those natural breaks to interject. You can't do that on Zoom. So we, that calls for, the need for a moderator. And then for the residents, again, it's expect to be called on, right? There is no muffin trick. There is no, I was on mute. To have some degree of interactivity and engagement, you really have to ensure that folks are participating and not just, putting things on mute and walking away. And then Tom, I know you had some comments about the speaker with the video on or everybody with video on.
There's been a nice discussion about it going on in the chat bar as we've been talking, and my own feeling was that it was too easy for residents to hide with the video being off. No, I don't want to see them wandering around in their pajamas, but I need to know they're there. And as some people in the chat bar said, having a video check at least once, having some of the conference where they have to be with video on, I am moving to that camp because I have certainly, had people who just clearly were not there, not paying attention. And I actually think having the video on helps with that sense of community, because now it's not just a name you're conversing with, it's an actual person.
Yeah, I think we've taken a middle ground. I think you mentioned it. We start every conference with the video on. We allow everybody to come in, say hello, see everybody's faces. But then when somebody is doing a didactic presentation, we have everybody but the speaker and sometimes the moderator turn their video off. If it's in a small group, if it's a breakout room, everybody obviously is with video on. But it does become a bit of a distraction when you have 20 plus people with the video on. And you're trying to focus on both the presentation and what's going on in each of the video panes. So I think there's a middle ground to be had.
So there does seem to be some stuff in the chat bar that's also linking, if you don't have your video on, that it equals no attendance, and that's from Erica Shaver. Sounds harsh, but we had the same challenge start with a bunch of black squares, no way to tell who was actually listening or out walking their dog. And Megan Stobrick Gallagher suggested that she had a post-conference quiz built during conference in order for both retention, but also to kind of check on attendance. So the concept of using video stuff for attendance. And then Annette Visconti said the same thing about requiring a video check, but kind of varying during the time.
So the next thing down on the chat bar was our next point anyway, which is we very quickly came to realize that the speaker can't easily follow the chat bar and break people into groups and post the paper that backs up what they say and forcibly mute people who have accidentally taken off their mute. All of those things, it became really important to have somebody who was essentially the chat moderator. It was the AV club that us nerds used to be in high school, and I think that has been great. So I think that we probably once that was instituted, all of that. The moderator, we have sometimes we have an attending to it. Sometimes we have one of the chief residents who is assigned to go and sort of fix a lot of the things, allow people in if you have a waiting room. All that stuff becomes really important. And we have 84 to 86 people showing up on regular. So we've been able to run it even with a very large program. And I haven't had the lag problems that people are talking about in the chat bar.
Yeah, and that comes down to technology a little bit. And we found that, most of these provide similar functionality. We actually, part of KP's suite, we have Microsoft Teams. We found that one of the challenges were that Teams would only run on KP devices. So if folks were trying to log in from home on their personal computers, they couldn't get in. So we quickly transitioned over to Zoom. I think there are some bells and whistles to all of them. All of them are going to have similar issues around, streaming and bandwidth. One of the reasons we've asked people to shut off their videos is when you're not using a phone to call in, but you're calling in using audio over your computer. If you have both video and sound running, it drags on the bandwidth. So that's been one little kind of tech tip that we've used. And usually when folks shut off their video, the audio comes through better. But as far as the technology, all of them have similar functionality. Some of them allow annotation. Tom, what are you doing? I'm just going to keep talking while Tom is. Some allow annotation. Tom, what are you doing, man? I'm trying to give the talk here. Wait, Tom.
So I think it is worth noting the annotation bar. I think it can work great for some things. I think it causes trouble with others.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this just comes down to knowing the functionality of the technology that you're using. There's some different bells and whistles. We're going to bring you through some of the things that you should know about in Zoom. It's always great to show the names of annotators so that you could publicly shame them if they are drawing things like Tom was just drawing on my screen.
It was a thumb. I was sort of not doing so well as we converted over to video conferencing because we started on Teams and we tried to find a way to do breakout rooms in Teams and failed miserably. So we shifted over to Zoom right as we were told that Zoom is a terrible platform and that you're going to get photobombed constantly. We haven't had any problems with the photobombing. And the first time that I thought conference finally felt normal was when we ran cases in small breakout rooms. We had people go into the breakout rooms. In that situation, we had everybody open their mic so that everybody in the room now, whatever they said was part of a conversation. And for the first time in conference, it finally felt like a conversation. And I realized that right after conference, I must have gotten 15 emails from the residents saying, thank goodness, let's do more small groups. I think that is what really matters. So again, we're relearning something that we already knew from regular conference, which is, small group case-based discussion is still some of the best ways to learn emergency medicine.
Yeah, and I think the breakout room feature, Tom, especially when you have a program as large as yours, it allows. It's easy to get lost in the crowd, and when you could kind of break the group down and allow folks to interact in a breakout room, it helps with some of that social component.
So we want to know from you guys what conferences have absolutely worked out the best. I want to know what you've done that is a huge success, basically, so that I can steal it.
So I'm going to toss in something that that you probably can't steal because it was your idea, but running CPCs through the small groups was brilliant, and it ended up being something where you could really get all different levels of participation into the game, and it felt game-ish enough that they were participating as well.
Yeah, that actually worked very nicely. Tracy, what did you get?
We had two that worked pretty well. We actually did a joint conference with OBGYN, and that was another one that we effectively used breakout rooms. And so we had, I'm at Duke, so we have 36 residents. I think they have maybe the same or slightly more. And we were able to go from initially a large group with all the faculty involved too. We actually had over 200 people in that for the first hour, and did some, of course, COVID stuff. This was we did that March 1st, I think. And we did a large group with all faculty from both and all the residents. And then we went into breakout rooms that were inclusive of both OB and EM residents, and did small group teaching with combined faculty from OB and EM doing different groups. Like I did an OB trauma, sort of like ended up like an oral boards case with both OB and EM residents, and was able to show all the stuff for that and get interaction. They did an ultrasound small group breakout room from that. So that worked really effectively with 2 residencies able to participate together on Zoom.
I love that. I think that it highlights some of the positives about this, that as you move to a Zoom format, some of the barriers like being near someone go away. And you're bringing together 2 departments. I think that's fantastic. And now that you've said it, I think that that's going to help me, because we've been trying to have a combined critical care, but we're often in 2 different buildings. So that actually would work really well. Also, one of the things that we found with this is that we're able to bring in outside speakers without flying them in, and I can give them shorter lectures, right? So we're all moving to shorter lectures. If you have an outside speaker come in, it's a little bit weird to say, come in and speak for 15 minutes on something. Whereas with this format, the outside speaker is essentially like everybody else. So you can have more than one speaker. You can have people come in for short periods of time, and it works really well. So I think you're highlighting one of the really positives of this. So that's great.
Yeah, I will add in that we did also at the beginning included a panel of experts throughout the hospital from infectious disease and the perinatal group and EM. So that was a really nice discussion with the groups.
Yeah, that's perfect, because some of those people don't know where the emergency department is in my hospital, so they can Zoom with us, but they couldn't find it.
Mary Ann, was there anything else that came across in the chat box?
So I see in the chat box there's a bunch of stuff about breaks. I sort of think, in all honesty, the residents are getting up and getting food and taking a break partway through most conferences. So I haven't done a lot to sort of make that extra time as part of a break. But I see that a bunch of people have actively made sure that the residents have time for a break. My big problem with it is that most of the time in actual conference that I would schedule a break, it was so the residents could talk together about cases and things like that. And I don't know how to get them to do that, during conference while, in a break from a meeting. So at least I haven't had that success yet.
Yeah, Tom, I mean, we've locked in 5 minutes on the hour. It's hard to stay engaged and stare at a computer screen. I agree. Most of the residents probably are getting up and walking around a little bit. Some are staring at their screen until conference is over. So we've built in just, 5 minutes on the hour, just get up, stretch your legs, walk around a little bit. Residents have taken favorably to it. So.
There's also some questions up here about the different platforms. So someone's asking about using WebEx to do, that is Shannon. Hi, Shannon. Shannon Moffat, using WebEx for breakout rooms. And someone else, sorry, it's moving quickly. Somebody else said that as well. And it looks like Hillary is.
Yeah, I don't.
Also, Hillary Fairbrother is also thirding the idea about getting some WebEx insights.
Yeah, Maninder and I had spoken about WebEx and whether there could be small groups on it, and I don't use WebEx, but I do know that I looked it up online, and it did say that was a feature available. It may be a feature, though, available for only certain levels of subscription.
Yeah, I mean, the other way that you can do breakout rooms, I mean, even Teams doesn't have breakout rooms. You can just schedule separate meetings that folks just transition over. And as long as they have the link to that meeting, they could just hop on or hop off. So, you don't necessarily need the breakout feature. That being said, it is nice as the moderator just to be able to push people out into their breakout rooms.
One of the other things I think we haven't talked about yet that has to do with using this technology and in the times we're in is that Tom had pointed out that a big function of conference is just the concept of spending time together. And I think outside of the strict didactic group of time, there are other things that I've seen either our program doing or other programs doing, whether it's like a happy hour or meet the interns. I'd be interested to hear what both you guys have to say about that and what the group has to say. Like what other suggestions and ideas might people have?
So I'll take a stab, and then Tom, you jump in. We actually are starting Zoom happy hours to invite friends and family and faculty to join in. We're actually going to be, we're not spending money on our weekly food for conference, so we're actually going to allow the residents to order in Grubhub or Uber Eats and submit their receipts, and the program will pay them back. And just anything to help with morale and to kind of lighten the mood a little bit, I think would go a long way. So we're actually starting that this week.
So we did virtual happy hours with no kombucha drinkers allowed. And then we also decided to bring people together with other functions. So we brought people together to talk about and with behavioral health faculty to talk about fears and all that sort of stuff as a separate thing. We've also done. I last week did got all the first years together and a bunch of others to try to talk about research so that there was a topic, but mostly it's just bringing people together using Zoom. And usually that's outside of conference that we're doing that. It was usually Tuesday night or other times like that, mostly so I can have a Bud Light.
So some other people are talking about having invited psychiatry. That's Vivian Ning is invited psychiatry to conference and use breakout rooms to do debriefing sessions. And also Tracy Thoreen said she had a live music night and virtual comedy show with local comedians, which is kind of
That's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
That was cool.
I might have to suggest that to my program director.
So just going to jump ahead. I mean, one of the things, and again, that drinking from the fire hose, slide, there are so many incredible resources out there, whether it's EM fundamentals or the shared speakers list on Allium Remote. Our program participated in the live Allium event this morning using Slack. I think it really is pushing us. Some of the things that we'll endure long after is to test out new things, shorten our lectures, cut them back, make them more interactive, use breakout rooms, all these things. So many great resources that I think this is forcing us to look into now. And doesn't mean you have to try them all at once, but just start trying little things here and there to improve the experience. So we've tried a little bit of everything over the past few weeks, and I think it's been great.
So one of the things I think we've all tried are the different games, pollings, and stuff like that. I tortured my residents in a single conference by trying out as many as I possibly could to see which ones work well. If you've played with the Zoom polling, it works reasonably well. It just doesn't have a lot of the sort of functionality as some of the other ones, but it's all within one app, so it was pretty successful. Poll Everywhere has an amazing amount of functionality, but with the people who are working off their iPhones, they have to switch back and forth between apps and the Zoom meeting to sort of pay attention and do all that, which thank God they're a lot better at it than I am, and they did pretty well. But as a thing, the two program is a little more difficult than one program, although I did like a lot of the functionality of it. And then actually it was Marianne who did Kahoot, and the music drove me absolutely freaking nuts during the thing, but it still worked reasonably well. And on the side, I'm seeing you need to do the Zoom poll ahead of time. And the answer to that, I did not do it ahead of time. When you click on there, you can write them as you go. So potentially the same person who is muting people who are unmuted could write questions as you ask them. So you ask the question, someone else types it in and puts it out to the group. It would be very, very quick, and I did that. I was typing the questions myself as I was going, so it actually worked reasonably well.
And one of the things that we tried a couple of weeks ago is what is Jeopardy? We do Jeopardy as kind of interactive gamification during didactics. What does that actually look like in the virtual setting? And it actually worked really well. We have our residents break up into resident families, so it was 4 groups. And the way that we did it is the moderator would ask the question, and as soon as the question was asked, somebody would put an X in the chat box, and that was the first person to ring the buzzer. And it worked reasonably well. And then actually this week I found, I don't know if anybody else has heard of this, there's Factile. It's actually an online Jeopardy. You could actually search for others' Jeopardy boards. You could share it. You could actually turn your Jeopardy into flip cards and actually use it as a study aid. And you could break up as many teams as you want. You could have as many residents. Everybody has their own buzzer, and using their phones, they could actually just buzz in. You could add videos, you could add images, and it's all online and interactive. So we're going to actually be trying that this week.
We love playing games in conference. That there's a whiteboard share as part of the feature for Zoom. You share the whiteboard, you have somebody drawing on it. The first person to figure out what disease they are drawing happens on the side. Let's say it's Ehlers-Danlos, and then you spend a minute or two talking about Ehlers-Danlos in whatever current situation you are in. So it is another way to get people to be involved, to actively participate, because, man, emergency medicine residents are competitive.
And drinking games. Who doesn't love a good drinking game, Tom?
Yes. So one of the things that I saw were people playing Flip Cup on Zoom, because you see their videos, and when they complete theirs, you sort of move on and do the thing. And I realized that anything can be done in the relay race fashion. So another way to get your residents to participate is this idea of a relay race. One person does something, then it moves down the line. Works very well for a lot of things in medicine. One of the things that we were using it for was Basically we're asking what antibiotics cover Staph aureus, and you would go down the line to see how many residents could come up with another answer for a drug that does a good job covering staph. What we didn't know, and the residents were much better than us, is the whole about the private chat function. So what was going on behind this were other residents were sending advice so that they could keep it going. And I love it, because that means that other residents are participating and learning and being involved. And it was sort of everything we wanted in that game. And it all has to do with how competitive the residents are and what sort of a strong motivator that is. So what's going to endure after COVID, Matt?
Yeah, I think you brought up the chat box feature. You could expand on that.
I think it's the best thing. I mean, even just as I read what you guys are putting up, I think that it's allowed residents who never spoke up before to communicate because they're more comfortable in this modality. I have already figured out how to make sure that my presenters now in our usual conference setting can have essentially a chat box that is up next to them while they are doing their presentations. And I want this to be something that endures, because I think that it makes presentations better. And so what we are going to do is, just like we have a moderator now, we are going to have a moderator when we are allowed back into, thank goodness for whenever that happens, we are allowed back in a room together. I'm going to keep a chat box because I think it's added a lot to conference.
What else is going to endure after COVID? I think we've now all been forced, and I mentioned this before, we've been forced to look out in the world at large, get away from PowerPoint, shorten our lectures, do more interactive, use breakout rooms, whether virtually or in person. The idea of bringing in a Zoom speaker, I mean, this is going to normalize, teleconferencing and teleeducation. And I don't see any reason, and Tom brought this up before, to have to fly somebody in when we've done this for several months and it works really, really well. I think this is a great way to bridge, the world of EM, and outside the world of EM, bring other minds, other speakers into our programs.
So another thing that I think will endure, and it's hard to imagine this now, but when conference gets back together, and we have been doing sort of regular conferences when we feel no longer socially isolated, I think I probably am going to allow for video conferencing about once a quarter. Because I think from a wellness point of view, allowing the residents who many have the conference day off to be home and sort of commute in just occasionally, I think that will be something that I continue to do just on the rare side. So I don't know who said the little thing on top there. The virus is small and we are bigger. But I adopted it, stole it as the sort of rallying cry for we will get through this. And I think that one of the reasons we're able to get through it is all the awesome resources that Cord and ALEM and all of the awesome ideas that you guys have, and I hope will share. I applaud you for doing such an amazing job of moving so quickly to online conferencing, and I hope that your experience has been, thanks, Matt, has been as positive as mine. But more importantly than that, I just think that it is an amazing thing that you are keeping your residents safe in this time. And I thank you all for coming and listening to us for a little while.
And with that, we will open it back up. I don't know, Marianne or Tom, you guys are watching the chat box better than I am, but if there are any other questions or comments just from the audience.
Tracy brought up something, Tracy Thureen brought up something which I think is very thoughtful, which is so great for introvert versus extroverts. Now, a lot of us, think that we're extroverts, but there are a bunch of introverts to some level in the specialty. And it is an interesting switch up to kind of have the learning system go this way, and allows maybe some of the quieter, more thoughtful, sit in, not really speak up people really kind of absorb and maybe feel more comfortable coming forward. I really want to thank Tom and Matt enormously. I've really enjoyed this. Does anyone else have any? Oh, for the break, Adam Ross is asking, for the breakout rooms, can you send out specific handouts to each room or group, or are you sending materials out to everyone beforehand?
So I have not been smart enough to figure out how to send just to individual rooms. I tend to break people up into the breakout rooms in the 15 minutes before the lecture starts. And then what I did was I emailed the cases to the rooms involved. So I had to use a second system in that case. I had, for the CPC one, for instance, I had all the CPC information, and once I broke them up into rooms, I didn't break them up into rooms ahead of time because I didn't know for sure who was going to be on. Our attendance has not been perfect through this. And then I just sent them out by email so that they would have all the stuff. There is the ability to broadcast to everybody, and you can broadcast to the 7 people within your room, but I don't know how to separate the 7 people in that room beforehand. Once you're in the room, I think you can broadcast to just your room very easily.
Yeah, what you can do is in the chat box, there's an ability to share files similar to Slack, but to my knowledge, and maybe you could go into the rooms beforehand as the moderator, but the moderator can actually go room to room and attach files into the chat box. And that's one way of sharing it with the breakout rooms. You could probably just go into the chat rooms in advance and do the same.
Yeah, Tracy says very nicely that if each faculty member has the material for that room, then they can share it in the room, and it works well.
Yep.
Any other questions or successes or fails from the group?
So the CPC, what we ended up doing was I had probably 10 or 15 old CPC cases where I had the material that was originally sent to the discussant, and then I had the answer separately. So what I did was I gave each room a different CPC, and then I had them come back to the main group after they figured out the case. And they basically had to explain why they came up with the answer they came up with, and show the evidence that they were using. And then only after they had sort of presented back to the group did we tell them the right answer, because deep down we're bad people.
I like Matt's pointing out that they did it with EKGs, which is also a fun way to do a small groups thing. Nice idea. I cannot thank Matt and Tom enough. This was absolutely fantastic. The timing was perfect. And I think just having the idea of how we can talk together to make, what this new crazy time is, work a little bit better for all of us as we teach our residents. And I cannot express my appreciation enough. And obviously also to Tina and to Moshe Weisberg. I would also put in a little plug that if you have particular topics that you think should be addressed in Cord Connects, that Dr. Weisberg and I are very open to hearing any suggestions. Feel free to contact us. I think this one was incredibly timely and incredibly appropriate. So Tom and Matt, thank you very, very, very much.
Quite welcome, and good to see everybody and good to hear your voice, Marianne. Be safe, everybody.
Keep your residents safe.